All right, everyone, welcome to the Game Changer Show. I'm your host, Mike McKay, and each and every week we do this show with people who are changing the game all over the country. And this is a live show, guys, so if you have any questions, please put them in the comments for our guests to answer. This week on the show, we have Logan Fullmer. Logan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, man. So for people who don't know you, could you give a little bit of background of how you got into the real estate business and what your business looks like today?
I got in the real estate business by chance. I'm in my early 40s and I was working in the oil field. And I just thought there was probably more to income. I watched guys running this really big $100 million a year business, and they didn't seem harder working or smarter than me, but they made a heck of a lot more money than me. And I thought maybe there'd be a time I'd get to try my hand at it. And there was a big layoff that happened, and I was part of that when the company I was working for was contracting when oil prices were going down. And at that, there was a time where I said, "Well, I had to tell myself, or I had to make a decision if I was going to go back to the oil field or do something on my own." And that was a fork in the road. And I tried myself out, and myself was better than the job, so he stuck with it. um, I looked at a lot of the information that was out there along the way, and I tried to find the most pragmatic, reasonable answer. And I was shocked at how different my path became over so many people. So there are a lot of people who just do what's happening out there, and it seems
Mm,
to work. This is an okay income. But I didn't want okay. I could go back to a job and have no risk and have an okay income.
mm.
Uh, over time, something developed for me. And, today I've got an office of about 25 people. We do 30 to 40 million a year in transactions, which we don't wholesale, we don't double close. We buy everything, cure title defects, clean up problems, and resell.
Mm.
So I'm taking title to all this. Um, right now we've probably got 150 units in inventory. From value in the low end, I don't know, $100,000 would be a low end inventory value up to we've got several $2-3 million properties in inventory, not like portfolio assets, but just inventory we're cleaning up to sell.
Yeah. When you say cleaning up to sell, like, can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, that's paperwork. That is no site work. That's all. There are ownership issues, disputes, title problems, judgments, liens, breaks in the title chain, fighting owners, missing owners, unresolved probates, unreleased mortgages, just all the things that when a typical wholesaler or rent house buyer or whatever just says, you know what, I'm going to pass on this deal because it's too much trouble. That's like our calling card. Those are the deals that we want.
Mm.
You,
How
you
did,
would laugh. We got our internal docket. We probably have 35 lawsuits pending right now. We're
sure.
plaintiff on 34 of those. Yeah.
How did you decide to like take this path in the business versus like all the other paths that are out there?
You know what? It made sense. It was a low, as I was feeling things out early on, I would flip a house, traditional buy at 150 grand,
Yep.
spend 40,000 a remodel and make 30, 40 grand. I would do that a couple times. I would go to the foreclosure auction and buy property and make it a rent house or just list it on MLS and make some profit. I was sole sourcing, direct sourcing from people and from wholesalers. So I was kind of doing a bunch of different things. And at the end of the year, this is 2000 and probably 17, I think. I went back and looked at all my deals. I did maybe 25 deals that year.
Mhm.
And I asked myself, what are the best deals? And I found that sourcing deals from green wholesalers, they would misprice and I'd get a great deal. And the deals that I sole source, direct source, but had problems and I had to work through them. Those are the two best lead sources. But I found there's something different with when I would encounter a problem, the average person would just solve the problem and get the deal done. I wouldn't. I would go back to the seller and say, look, I can't pay you 50 grand for this. You got major issues. I'm going to try to take a stab at fixing them, but I can only pay you 20 grand. Like I've got to
Mhm.
lower this price. And people were usually afraid that if you try to trade them down, they'll walk away. And I could care less because I was not looking to work my butt off for small dollars. I'd already been in the oil field. I'd done this. So I would go and trade folks down, and if they'd accept a much lower price that was risk adjusted for the work, I would do
Hmm.
the deal, walk away. And those deals are whoppers. I'd make 50 grand or 80 grand by just buying something. And I never wanted to do really, I did a few remodels, but typically I would just want a good deal and get it listed on the market and just
Hmm.
capture equity. And that was the smartest, fastest, highest dollar per hour activity. So when I found opportunities to do that, I went further on those much more frequently.
Uh-huh.
And I think I learned faster than a lot of people actually, because folks will remodel themselves to death over 10 years and wonder why, then wonder what's next. And it took me about 10 remodels. I was like, no way, dude.
Yeah. So obviously, like along with like these title issues, right, comes work. Like you said, like I was only willing to do it if they would agree to a price that kind of made the juice worth the squeeze, essentially.
Bingo.
So as you start to do more and more of those deals, I mean, I know personally, I'm like allergic to like any admin and legal work. I just try to get someone else to do it. But like, how did you scale that part of the business so that you didn't have to be the person solving all those issues individually?
In the beginning, I was the one that did it all. So I hired an assistant to help, but I was the one staying up late at night, reading the property code, reading court cases to figure out what in the heck happens, how it works, calling title underwriters, reading title underwriting manuals, like stuff like that, that the average person just says, hell no. I was willing to do the work.
Hmm.
And after a couple years, I started to learn almost as a craft. I would specifically look for these deals. I started to see the similar problem over and over and over, and I realized this is a thing. And when you're new in business, you have all the time and no money. Well, if you're getting good, you'll eventually have less time and more money.
Hmm.
Um, and at that time, I thought, gosh, yeah, I mean, I want like some sort of life. Yeah, so I basically would look for guys that were young, hardworking, smart, and they just hadn't kind of figured their thing out yet. But I thought they had promise, and I would work with them and start doing some JV deals. And I'd worked with one of them for half a year and thought, man, this dude could do this for a living. So I basically asked him, "You want to quit your job and do this? I'll fund the deals. We'll split them in half. You find them, and I'll teach you what I know." Anyway, I
Mm.
developed a partner model. So over time, I added new partners in each one. I would fund their LLC, put capital in there, train them, and help support them. Anyway, today there are 6 or 7 businesses in this office running like that, and each one has a partner that manages it. And I've got a share of that company as a shareholder,
Huh.
but they hired administrative people and salespeople and all that. So
Interesting. Yeah.
that's how I chose to grow it. And the reason, what I've found early on is all these folks that were good at acquisition were working for other investors, and they would leave. They would stop working for them because I would hear this all the time. Oh, that investor was going to pay me 15 or 20% commission, but then they wanted to take this deal and put it in their portfolio, so they only paid me 3 grand. I would hear all these like shady stories. And I thought, dude, people are just taking advantage of these people. And I thought, how do I get someone who's good and quality to stick around? I thought, well, I'll make them a partner. And if I can help them earn enough income that it's better to work with me than without me, then they'll stick. Well, we
Yeah.
have 25 people here and it's stuck.
Wow. So they all have their own individual like teams that work underneath them, and you have a partnership in each of their businesses. And then, are you funding all their deals too, or helping them fund all their deals?
So in the beginning, yes. In the beginning, I put the capital in, started to grow it. And, usually these deals, we have smaller investment than like a flip house, for example. You might invest 70% of the sales price in a flip house. On these
Uh-huh.
deals, it's 20, 30, 40%, much less. But I
Oh,
would help produce the capital. When the deal got done, we would repay the capital, leave some retained earnings, pay a little to him, a little to me. But we would inherently grow the equity of that business as quick as possible. So over time, I could get my investment back out of it. And it started out my money. Then over time, it was our money. So
uh,
as the equity grew in the company now, one guy's got $1 million credit line, a couple million in equity, and that 3 million bucks is what he uses to, turn deals.
yeah. Do you still have people like working for you directly who do acquisitions, or are you really just focused on this partner model?
I haven't done direct deals for probably 3 years now. Each person is doing their own deals, and it's working great. And I stay here for the legal stuff, and when we need some financial maneuvers, I'll participate there. But when all that started to free up about 3 years ago, I asked myself, I had these really easy days at the office for probably 3 or 4 months, and I wasn't really sure what the next move was, but this worked, and I didn't want to mess it up. And I started to get a lot of requests for coaching and like advisory and consulting, and that's kind of
Mhm.
how I started to ease into that once my time was free.
Gotcha. So, like these types of deals, like these messy title deals, like are you guys, or well, I guess it's the other people, but who work with you, the partners, are you intentionally marketing towards certain data, or they focus on them as they come up in the leads?
This is all we look for. I have no interest in doing a deal that's going to give me a 20% return. I'm looking for 50 to 100% returns or greater. So that's all we look
Yeah,
for.
yeah.
So that our entire pipeline is full of stuff. We've got, gosh, I can't remember right now, somewhere between 150 and 170 units in inventory that we're currently like own a share of or all of, and it's either on the market, being fixed, or whatever. So that's what our inventory looks like at the moment, and it is all that.
It's all that. Okay. How do you go about if someone wanted to go out and find these types of deals? I mean, how would they go about finding these deals?
There are a lot of different ways to do it. In the beginning, I would call wholesalers and ask them for deals that they couldn't close. Every wholesaler, investor, broker, title agent, lawyer, they all know of deals that couldn't close. So that's how I
Mm,
started. At one point when there wasn't a lot of resources here, but as I started to get some resources and do more and more volume, the commonality that I saw, the common theme across all of them is they almost all had delinquent taxes. That's kind of a calling card when problems get big and people are just flat out done fooling with it. They quit paying the taxes.
mhm. So that's kind of, and do you guys focus only on Texas stuff or elsewhere or
We're in about half a dozen states.
half a dozen states? Is there something in
A
common
large,
about?
large part of our inventory is in Texas, but we got stuff in Tennessee, Georgia, other states that have laws similar to Texas.
That's what I was going to ask. How did you pick the other states that you
Yeah.
went into?
Texas is very high property tax, probably more so higher than most. Um, but if you've got states that have similar probate laws, if you got states that have similar creditor laws, judicial tax foreclosure and not a tax lien, not a tax lien. We want tax deeds. We like that
Okay. What makes you guys like the tax deeds versus the tax liens?
because they vest the title. So a tax lien encumbers a property, but it doesn't stop a transaction. Like people can own the property all day long and the tax liens stack up. Well, what incentivizes them to satisfy that? One day when they want to sell the property, they have to, if they want title insurance, they have to satisfy these back liens. But in those states,
Mhm.
those liens don't get perfected and foreclosed, really. I mean, they can, but it's not common. Here in Texas, a sheriff is going to auction the deed to that property off once it's been encumbered by a tax lien in a very short amount of time. You
Uh,
lose the property if you don't pay. In the tax lien states, it doesn't work quite like that. It's very slow, and there's a lot less motivation to the property owner to settle up.
sure, because they got the time and they'll just sit on it until they finally go to sell it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
What would you say are the most? I mean, I know it's like a lot of messy title stuff, but what would you say are like the most common scenarios that you run into that say like a wholesaler brings you a deal, be like, man, we just can't get this closed.
Ownership disputes.
Uh,
I'd say probably 70% of the transactions are just owners that can't get along, can't get their business together. One person paid the taxes 1 year, nobody reimbursed them. They're mad. I don't know. You have a lot of fractured families where a man leaves his family and goes starts a new family. Well, those kids on both sides of the family hate each other. When they eventually inherit together, then
mhm.
they have infighting. And frankly, if they just get their shit together and sell a property, they don't even have to be in the same room. Just sign on the dead gum dotted line. They could all make a lot of money. But because they refuse to do that, then they've got to sell at such an extreme discount because they can't get title insurance. They can't sell unanimously.
So let's say someone brought that deal to you, right? There's different sides of an ownership dispute. They hate each other, not going to talk. How do you go about proceeding with that deal?
Usually, I like to have some kind of introductory call just to find out if the circumstances are what I think they are, or if I think if the circumstances are what I'm being told they are, and what's the context. There's sometimes sometimes the juice, just like you said earlier, the juice is not worth the squeeze. Sometimes you got people, you need a fair group of people that are willing to sell to you for a fair enough price that you can pick up some equity on it and have a budget for legal fees and time and effort and equity. If there's nobody in that ownership pool that's willing to sell their share to you for a pretty significant discount, then there's no place for me in that deal. So I need to assess that. Then I need to assess, does the property have enough equity at all? I mean, is there enough? And there's another thing too. This takes a little bit of experience to understand, but you need a big enough problem to get a good deal on the property, but not such a big problem that it's going to take you hundreds of thousands in legal fees and 10 years to fix. I've seen property that literally has 200 owners to it and 40 incomplete probates over like a 70-year period. I mean, it's just the worst, dude. There are judgments and liens like you can't even count. And then you have like one owner that lives on the property and thinks it's worth $60 million, like the craziest stuff ever. Like there's no purpose in close to that. You can't have that.
Yeah. So let's say you find this person, right? You talk to this person, they're like, okay, look, I'm done with it. I'm willing to take a big discount on it. It doesn't seem like an insane amount of work or cost. Like what would you do from there since you don't have the other people on board, the other owners?
Let's use a common scenario. So I ran a report and I found some very average numbers over 100 trailing transactions in one of the companies. The average sales price was $194,000. That was the average. So these are not super high value properties on average. Our average entry point, all in with purchasing interest and taxes and everything and legal fees, was $48,000. So you do the math, there's about $150,000 gross margin after covering overhead and all these other things and cost to sell with title and all. You wind up with about $125,000 net margin. So there's a significant profit, $125,000 in profit on a $50,000 lot. That's a good deal. There's plenty of room to make mistakes. There's plenty of room for this deal to go on longer than you expect, and it's still okay. So a deal like that, we on average have 3 to 4 owners. That's a very standard metric. So I'm wanting to buy, if all those average numbers are the deal we're talking about, that means each owner's share is worth about 50 grand. And there's somewhere between, I don't know, $10 and $30,000 in taxes. I'm going to want to buy that $50,000 share of equity for probably anywhere from $500 to $5,000.
Yeah.
Super low. So once that happens, I'm going ahead and contract that person. So they're contracted. I get to buy their property no matter what happens. And I'll place quick calls to the other owners and kind of feel them out, see what's going on, get an idea of what I think is going to happen. And then once I get that done, I'll go ahead and close on this share and either rapidly pick up the other shares, or sometimes I'll have a dispute. Sometimes I've got to have long drawn out conversations, got to have meetings with people. Sometimes I'll pay off taxes and file lawsuits. There's just a million reasons that you could find a problem, or there's a million ways that you could resolve these matters, but it starts with talking to people.
Yeah. How often are you actually able to like pick up all the shares from the other people at a price that makes sense once you close on the first person?
80% of the time.
Really? Okay.
So one of the comments I made earlier is probably 70% of these deals are just ownership disputes. And what's keeping the people from selling is they just don't get along with the others and they're too hard-headed or they just don't care. Well, my plea to them is, look, I realize that. this property's never going to get resolved. Don't you agree? And they're like, yeah, we've been trying for 10 years, nothing. It's like, look, let me give you a couple $1,000 for your share. I'll get you paid tomorrow. I'll send you over to a lawyer's office or a mobile notary, mobile closing agent, whatever. Let me get you paid, and it's done. You don't have to worry about it ever again. You're never going to get any money anyway. We know that. Why don't you take a couple grand from me? And when people, if you had a car in your driveway that worked and you used it every day, you're not selling it for cheap. If you had a car that's been sitting there for 10 years and won't start and you don't know how to fix it and you finally given up on it, if someone hauls it away for $500, you'll let it go to get it out of your driveway. People look at property the same way.
Yeah. Gotcha. So then you round up all the owners, hopefully get them all on board, and then you've got 100% interest, right?
That's it. Yeah.
And then what happens when you don't?
There's a million things that could happen, but most states have a partition in their state laws, partition of real property, that allows you to file a claim in the court there, district or county court, whatever. That's usually not a federal case. It's a local jurisdiction, but you can file a plea to that court and ask the judge to sell the property and split the money. That's what it boils down to.
So in that
you rarely have to actually do that, but the fact that it exists, and once you start explaining that or even file it, the counterparties usually come back and say, okay, I'll play ball.
Right. Yeah. And then in that case, what does that go to, like public auction, kind of foreclosure, or how does that probably get sold?
So it depends on the state. It depends on whether it's heirs property or not. There's a bunch of different variables, but ultimately what happens is the judge orders it sold, and depending on where you're at, it can be listed on the listing service. It's got to be appraised usually. It can be listed on the listing service or auctioned off by a public servant. And then the proceeds go to the court registry, and then the judge divvies up the money.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So that's why it's more important to pick up a bunch of equity on the front end, because if you have to go through this hassle and spend 10, 20, 30,000 in legal fees to get to your equity, you still want to make sure to not lose money. Like, it might take a year and you might spend 30 grand in legal. So you need to have enough equity there that won't kill your margin.
So that's why you need to pick up that $50,000 share for $500 or $5,000, so that in case you spend 30 grand, you're not upside down.
Right. So you get lucky enough and none of those risk events happen, then you're going to have a really big margin. Generally speaking, you get the really big margin and all those risk events don't occur. But, 1 out of 5, 1 out of 7 times, you got some problem that shrinks margin and increases time. So you got to deal with a little bit.
Yeah. So for people who are like getting into doing these type of deals, and I know you coach a lot of those people, like, what are some of the mistakes, besides maybe paying a little too much on the front end, that you see people make?
That's the first one, paying too much.
Yeah.
The second one is just jumping in and not paying attention. You can wholesale a house and not really know what you're doing. You get a contract, as long as you have an option on it, you can opt out and protect yourself and have no legal recourse generally. In this case, you're buying a deed from somebody. You're going to become a property owner. There may be claims against that share of the property. There might be claims against the property. There might be claims across owners. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff going on. You just don't know what you don't know. And sometimes folks say, well, I got a deed for $500. And I'm like, yeah, but there's a creditor foreclosing on this property because of some big judgment against one of the owners. Like, you're going to have to show up in court next week, dummy. You got things like that where they don't research. Sometimes they don't do enough research and say, well, I bought a deed for $500. I'm like, yeah, but it's 1/7. There's 6 other owners, dude. No, I got it all. No, there are 6 other owners.
So what should people do to protect themselves so they don't end up in those situations?
It is a little bit more complicated model. I mean, we've got a ton of resources out there, but the things I tell people in the beginning is make sure to use an option contract. In order to risk adjust the deal, pay as little as possible, because ultimately a lot of these problems, a person isn't personal liability. The claim is against the real estate. So if you buy a share that's contested or have problems, many times what you've spent is all you have at risk a lot of times. So you have to be careful, because I find people that just don't know what they're doing and say things that are wrong and do things that are out of bounds and don't realize it. They could be at risk for fraud claims, things like that. And they didn't know any better. They just frankly, I know, like, if you have no experience in real estate, this is not the place to be. You need to go flip some houses, go wholesale some deals, like, get some
Mm.
practice, and then come to this space. Because if you show up here and don't know the lay of the land in real estate, you could slip and fall into a fraud claim quickly and don't even
Yeah,
know it.
yeah, for sure. What else like about because this is like a very unique model compared to like most of the people that I speak with, right? So like, what else should people know if they go about, trying this route?
Gosh, what do they need to know? Well, I think they need to learn how to get good on the phone. They need to learn how to talk to people. That's really important. You would
Hmm.
be shocked at how many deals are actually simple. The framework is simple, and there are a lot of deals that can be solved simply. So if folks want to get into it, you got to have a framework of real estate. You got to understand where to find the tax office. You got to understand the appraisal district. You got to understand what a conveyance is and what makes a valid conveyance, things like that. I mean, you got to
Hmm.
understand all that. Once you understand that, I would recommend people start trying to take a run at it by getting on the phone to people, finding the simple deals, the ones that have one, two, three, four owners, and that don't have big title problems. Now, I will tell you, you do need to, if you don't know what you're doing and unwilling to do the research, get a real estate attorney that you can access quickly and simply. That's really important because he can answer a lot of these problems as long as he's qualified. He can answer a lot of these problems that most people struggle with. Like, for
Hmm.
example, if I person share, how do I know if they have judgments or liens against them that would encumber their title to that portion of the property? A good real
Hmm.
estate lawyer, a good real estate lawyer will tell you, go get a title report from a title company real quick. Go buy a title report online from a provider. Go run a quick judgment and lien search in the deed records on your computer to make sure the person's name doesn't appear in that search. Those are a
Hmm.
lot of basic fundamental things that will prevent big mistakes.
Yeah, for sure.
But I will tell you, a lot of folks think it's so complicated that they get scared off. And I mean, if you figure out wholesale 4 deals a month already, you've got a lot of foundational information. Go get some
Yeah.
good education, go get some good courses, and take a run at it. It doesn't cost you any money to make calls and see if you can piece a deal together. Get someone to review it like a lawyer, and if they approve it, then close it.
Yeah. How would you suggest that like people go about finding a good like real estate attorney who's like knowledgeable about this type of stuff though? Because there's a lot of real estate attorneys out there. Not all of them are the best, and some of them are great. But how do you find the great ones?
Usually referrals. In the early days, I had no idea. I would get referrals. I would hire lawyers. I would have meetings. They'd do a probate for me, do some deeds. And basically, in a short amount of time, I'd realize, dude, I hate this guy. This guy's a terrible service provider. Or, oh, wow, his secretary calls him back quickly. They communicate very well on the internet or on the email. I am aware. I know what's happening. Invoices are timely. These people know what they're doing. You'll start to
Mm.
find that just like you will if you hire a contractor.
Hmm.
This is something that folks have to understand, though, or that it's why if they learn this, it'll put them ahead. A real estate lawyer is a service provider, just like a contractor, like a plumber or a drywall guy. They just got more education, just like a surveyor. They are a service provider. And folks a lot of times go to them for answers, and real estate lawyers say, you can't do that because of this. And if folks
Mm.
don't question these answers and double check it, most of their deals will die. I've been told by real estate lawyers all my life, don't do that. You can't do it. And I'm like, I did $30 million worth of sales last year that real estate lawyers said don't do. And I've changed my life because of it. And I've
Hmm.
changed 24 people in my office lives because of it. So I don't take those answers for face value all the time.
Mm. So you give them some pushback, but like, are you also seeking like second opinions a lot of times? Or, I mean, obviously you have the experience, so I've done that before. Like, he's telling me I can't do it. Maybe that's not true, but for someone starting out, like, what's your advice
This
there?
stuff, man. If you have a problem with if you start to understand some context and some of the terminology around the problem that a title agent will tell you, like let's say you look at a property and you want to try to make a deal work on it, and you're not sure what to do, call title company. They can do a
Yeah.
little research with you or for you, learn how to get into the deed records. Once you start to do some of those basic things, you'll start to find problems. You'll learn the terms. You'll be told them from sellers or from title companies. Get on the internet and research information out there. as you'll find anywhere. And sometimes a lawyer will tell people, no, you can't do a partition. That doesn't work in the state. And I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? Section 23A of y'all's property code. Like, are you kidding? Yes, you can. Just because a lawyer's a lawyer doesn't mean he knows this very well. So really getting on Google and digging around is where I really started to learn a lot. All the main resources, all of your laws are on Google for free. Your property code, your estates code, your tax code, all that stuff, all those sets of laws that affect property in your state are for free online. Attorneys do tons of continuing education and they write these white papers basically and educate lawyers. This stuff gets posted for credibility's sake online. Dude, there are slews of this stuff out there that's just ripe for the reading if you just know how to Google.
Yeah.
But I will tell you this. If you're interested in doing research and willing to read and spend time, and it's a little bit more of an academic endeavor. If you're not that kind of person, this probably isn't for you.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. And then, so these deals, like, are you not able to get title insurance on them in the states that you work in when you're buying a partial interest, or how does that work?
I've never been able to get partial insurance interest insured. I've been told that some places will insure in certain states. In the first state that I did it in, but eventually I started to understand what the guidelines were to underwrite a title, whether it's clear or not clear. And I got to the point where I could underwrite myself. And eventually I thought, what's the purpose of getting title insurance? It's a hassle. And if I'm closing this in my office with one of the attorneys that work for me, who cares? I don't need insurance. It's like a car. Your car can drive if you don't have insurance. It still turns on and works. The property is still fine. I don't have to have insurance to have clear title. Insurance protects that. So I generally started buying without title insurance because it was just simple and easy and we understood it. And when we go to sell, we will the title will be marketable at that point so we can get insurance for our buyer. But that is our job is to cure that. Now, when folks are new in this business, I recommend that they work closely with a title insurance company, like keeping them updated, like an escrow officer, keeping them updated with what they're doing along the way to make sure they're not, really messing up. And after a little bit of guidance like that, you'll start to understand where you're headed.
Yeah. Gotcha. And I guess if you're putting down 500 to 5,000 or small amounts per deal, if one were to go sour, I mean, just kind of.
So that was my premise early on. I remember asking, like, I didn't have anybody to ask this to. There's nobody doing this 10 years ago at all. And I remember asking myself, what if it goes wrong? Well, nobody really had any answers. So I had to answer that myself. And the answer was, can I afford to lose $500? The answer was yes. Do I care about losing $500? Well, I don't, because that was 25% of my rent at the time. But I was willing to take a risk for $500 to pick up 30 grand in equity. I took that risk and it paid out. So I kept doing it.
Yeah. So outside of like ownership disputes, like what other common scenarios do you guys run into with these deals?
We get a lot of judgments and liens, lots of them. So when folks don't pay their child support, you get a lot of those kind of judgments and liens. You got medical liens. Folks get their credit cards. They get sued for credit card debt, repos on cars, contractor liens. Sometimes people get evicted from an apartment and the apartment sues them. And there's a $4,000 judgment out there for delinquent rent. I mean, judgments and liens are the second most common matter. So we have spent years getting really good at negotiating with creditors and understanding what makes a valid lien, because shockingly enough, a third of the liens we find out there the title company puts on the commitment, I go back and say this was misindexed, or the judgment that was rendered to produce this wasn't indexed to this person's property properly, take it off, and they do it. Or title companies will just throw these judgments and liens on the title commitment, but they're beyond statute of limitations for collectability. So it shows up and I say, can you remove this? It's 14 years old and that's a 10-year statute lien. Sure, I'll take it off.
Yeah. Yeah, we had a deal we did like a month ago where it was a credit card company had sued the lady for not paying. And in Florida, if it's your homestead, the lien's invalid. And the title company pulled it up. We asked them that and they're like, oh yeah, never mind. Was it her
Well,
homestead? Yeah, and then it went away. Well, it didn't go away,
so
but she didn't have to pay
this
it.
is a nuance. The lien isn't invalid. It means the lien is valid, but it can't attach to a person's homestead and prevent their sale.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, a lot of what I deal with is vacant property and abandoned property. So that doesn't work most times, but it does some.
Okay.
Now, another thing we find is if the lien is valid and it was recorded correctly and all those things, if a creditor doesn't collect on a debt within the first couple years, the probability, like there are models online you can look at, the collectability of debt plummets with time. So if they don't collect in the first couple of years, the probability is like single digit percentages that they collect the debt.
Yeah.
So you get a 6-year-old judgment and you don't call the creditor and say, we're trying to close a real estate transaction. Will you cut me a good deal? Because they'll usually say F off. You call them and just offer to buy the debt, buy the judgment, or pay it and settle it at a fraction of the face value. Let's just say the debt's worth 50 grand. I'm starting offering a couple $1,000, and average, we probably pay 25 cents on the dollar for most judgments that we can't just get ripped right off the bat, and we have to buy them or negotiate them. Probably 25 cents on the dollar.
So you said two things there. Said you either buy the debt or settle it for a fraction. Can you explain like the difference between those two approaches?
So when I call somebody and say, hey, I'd like you to release this, many times they'll ask why, and I tell them I'm not going to disclose that, but if you're interested in releasing it, I'm willing to talk about it. The other answer is that makes them believe there is a transaction that might be attached. They might want to know more. If I call and just say, look, I'm a debt buyer, which I am, I'm a debt buyer and I know you have some debt recorded in this county and it's 7 years old, you probably won't collect anything on it. Will you sell it to me for $500? Many times they look at it as pennies from heaven because they believe they won't collect anyway. They will file an assignment of the debt from them to me. They file it in the deed records and I pay them $500 and then I go file the release.
Got it. So you're buying it from them, right? And then you're just releasing it once you go to closing. Okay. Interesting. And then
I may not, if I go to closing, I might get it assigned to me immediately and then I'll release it immediately. I can do what I want with it. Or sometimes if I'm dealing with pesky property owners who have liens against them, I can buy the lien against them and then call them as a creditor and say, hey, I encumber your real estate. You need to cut a deal with me or I'm going to foreclose on your share of the real estate, or maybe we cut a deal. I don't know.
explain that part again. So if you have an owner who's not cooperating, right? You buy and they have some debt against them or a lien, you buy that lien, and then what do you do there?
Now I'm the creditor.
Okay.
They owe me money.
Right.
So if they don't pay me that money, I can foreclose on assets they have to collect my debt, like a share of real estate, maybe a secondary vehicle, things like that.
Yeah. And you bought that for 25 cents on the dollar. Yeah.
If that, sometimes less, but yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of leverage. I mean, it's a challenging game, and you've got to be careful because sometimes one of the guys in my office loves to get complicated, and he loves to, if we do this, then we do this, and what about that? And I'm like, dude. The juice ain't worth the squeeze. Is a $30,000 deal, man.
Sure. Yeah.
But we have deals that have millions in equity. And when you have that kind of money at stake, there's a lot of levers to pull if you need to.
Yeah. Do you try to go after? I mean, I know you said your average price is sale price like 194. Do you try to go after the larger deals just because like the juice is more worth the squeeze, or do you find that there's other challenges that come along with those $2-3 million deals?
That's an astute question. So the unique challenge that comes with as the price increases, this factor increases more. Folks are more willing to fight for high value. So I've got an example. On a property that's worth 150 grand and you got multiple owners, there's a lot less equity on that one than it might be a $2 million deal with 3 owners. I've got a case right now. It's being litigated. I think I was told the property is worth a couple $1 million. That's what I was told by the counterparties. And because that property might be worth a couple $1 million, they're willing to spend real money on legal fees. They're really willing to spend the time to deal with it because there's so much more money at stake. And you find as the
Mhm.
price point increases, that fight is more willing to be had and be had longer and more expensively.
Sure. Yeah. The juice becomes worth the squeeze for them too, if
Yep.
there's
You know,
a lot of table.
so
Yeah.
that also causes your underwriting to look differently when you're looking at higher price deals because you have to account for other things, and that's just something you get with over time. You start to understand that, and you model it in, and you're prepared.
Yeah. And you kind of underwrite the time and the cost and all things that might come along with that.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. Interesting. And then, so you said, let's say you did want to, someone was in a situation like this and they wanted to negotiate with one of these creditors. I mean, is it as simple as calling up these collections agencies and just saying, I want to buy the debt? Or, I mean, they're that responsive to that, or?
Well, the collection agency knows. So the way it works is debt is usually owned by an individual or a company. Debt
Uh-huh.
is debt is usually collected by a collection agency or a lawyer.
Okay.
So I don't like calling the intermediary because they're usually hard to deal with and they're trying to get a better deal. I like to go directly to the owner of the debt, and you can understand that by looking at the judgment, the lien, or the lawsuit that was associated. That information is easy to understand. So I like to go
Hmm.
direct to the owner. But yeah, you'd be shocked, man. You just pick up the phone and call them and just make them an offer. It's the bigger the company you're dealing with, like the slower the process is and the harder it is to get things moved quickly. I worked on a deal earlier this year. It was a train wreck with this warehouse. And man, they had two lawyers dealing with it and they brought in another one. And it was over lawyered like crazy. It took months and months and months to get it resolved. But when you're dealing with a little bit like a smaller mid-size type operation, it can become easier.
Yeah. So like credit card companies, are they like fairly difficult to get those negotiated just because they're so big, or do they kind of give up because they don't
You
get their
know,
chance?
right, credit card companies are actually pretty efficient to deal with. You're
Really?
calling them and yeah, because they've got such a robust collection process and they're in the business of issuing debt, collecting on debt. You can call
Uh-huh.
them and make an offer and you should have some answer within a week or week and a half, and you can get something like that negotiated fairly fast. While they're big, this is their business. But
Okay.
like you might like something that I'll see a lot is like a mid-sized business, like a construction company did
Mhm.
services for some other business, like I don't know, or maybe like a vendor bought a whole bunch of materials from someone and they didn't get paid, and then they'll file a lawsuit and the business won't answer. There's a default judgment for $40,000 against a warehouse.
Mhm.
You'll see, or against a business that owns a warehouse.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
You see that a lot. In that case, I'm calling a small business owner who might have a $3 million a year business. I'm calling a guy like you or me. Hey man, you
Yeah.
got a problem? Want to cut a deal? I don't know. Let's talk.
Yeah. Yeah, I could imagine that if they, especially if that's debt, that judgment's been sitting there for years, that they're just like, man, just write me a check for 10 grand and I'm done with this. Like,
I bought a judgment against a warehouse owner. God, it was like I think I paid like $1,000, and the judgment was like 40 grand or something like that. That's where I came up with that scenario, the real one. I remember the guy saying, "This dude's pesky." I tried to collect from him. He's a deadbeat, and I just said, "Okay, fine. I won't give you 5 grand. I'll give you a grand." He laughed and took it.
that's great. So, I mean, what else for people like kind of getting into doing these types of deals? Like, what are the things that they don't know that they don't know walking into it that maybe they should consider?
I learned, man. I've been in this business over 10 years now. I learn something new every day. There's a lot of don't know what you don't know. The
Yeah.
the the advice that I give that's more pragmatic and useful is I tell
Mhm.
people if you got some interest in this, get yourself a delinquent tax list, pick a county that you know well, in a state that has decent laws, good foreclosure laws, and start calling people. They've got a large part of the people that are in foreclosure have ownership or title problems. Just start asking questions, interview them. Don't be aggressive. The whole Andy Elliott sales thing, we're pressuring people in the corner. Don't do that. Just call them and say, look, I work on properties that have title and ownership problems and stuff like that. Looks like your property might be one of those kind of properties. If you've got some interest in talking, I might know how to solve it. I don't know. You want to chat?
Yeah.
Low pressure conversation. Some people say "f off," I got it solved, and hang up. But more often than not, they say, "Oh man, that's Granny's property. It's a mess. My brother's been in and out of prison. We don't even know where my sister is. I'm the only sibling that has this stuff together, but I can't sell because of them. I don't know what to do." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well, let's talk more about that."
Yeah.
That's a good answer for me.
Yeah.
So I
Let's take
just
that.
tell people, get on the phone, start talking to people, ask questions. And then once you collect that information, go to a lawyer, go to a title company, and start posing these scenarios, pose them to Google, pose them to Chat GPT now. And it's a puzzle, man. Just start piecing that puzzle together. And I mean, you'd be shocked how quickly you can piece stuff together like that without having to be like a rocket scientist?
Yeah. So let's take that scenario, right, where one of the owners has kind of disappeared.
Yeah.
Like they've been gone for 5 years. I mean, how do you resolve that?
Well, let me ask you this way. Who could get information that the average person couldn't?
Private investigator.
I'm paying money. Go find me this person. That's it. That's
Yeah.
exactly what you do.
Yeah.
In the early days, we would do the research on our own. And then when we get completely stuck, we would find people, social media, Google, land records, calling and interviewing neighbors. We find a lot of people. But as our company grew, we got to the point where we would do the preliminary research and we couldn't find it. We've got a retired FBI agent who is a private investigator. Dude, that dude can smoke you out of a damn gas station bathroom, dude. I don't know how he does it. He does it. So we hand the file over to them. They go do the research and bring them back. And here's your phone number. I talked to him. He's looking for your call. So there you go. We have
Yeah.
found people in Peru, Switzerland, Germany, Canada. Actually, the person we found in Canada lived in New Jersey and was on vacation in Canada. And we caught him 3 days before the tax sale in Canada.
Huh. You said too earlier that you said you have a couple lawyers that work for you. Like, at what point did you make that decision to bring that in house, and why did you make that decision?
Today we spend, I don't know, 50 to 70 grand a month on legal fees because we've got a significant docket and a significant pipeline. And that while that might sound like a lot of money, think about, you got 150 whatever properties in inventory. Every single deal has a $3,000 to $10,000 legal budget. But if you're
Mhm.
buying it for 30, 40,000 and you need 3 to 10 grand to fix some matters or some contracts or whatever, it's just a piece of your budget, just like the same money you spend for realtors or escrow fees or surveyors. That's just part of the budget. But when you add it up across a lot of inventory units, it becomes expensive. And what I started to find is in the early days, I was working with small law firms because that's what I thought I could afford. I thought it was the right answer. And those guys start to get slow at calling you back. They're busy. They're not the best business owners usually. And we had to start to step up to the mid-sized firms because they were well staffed and could serve as clients like professionally. But we
Mm.
realized our spend started to get, we could keep, once my monthly legal bills were equivalent to the salary of a lawyer, I thought, I see the writing on the wall.
Yeah. And so then you just
And I don't
decided.
know that that gets us better legal representation. What it gets us is immediate, and we get to be the priority. I don't care what the pipeline looks like for that attorney. When they work for you or bill 80% of their time to you, you call them and say, "I have an emergency," and they jump on it right now. But there are not very many people that have, I don't know how many lawyers I got in this cell phone, but I'll tell you what, 80% of them, I can call them on a Saturday afternoon and they'll answer my phone call. Most people can't get a lawyer to answer their phone call during the business week. They'll get an email or call back 4 days later. That is a big difference. And that means we can move quickly, solve problems fast, and get there. Those things started to matter when the business grew.
So is there certain legal work that you guys will do in house, and then you'll still outsource some of it, certain matters to other firms, or how do you decide that on a file?
So when it comes to protracted litigation, we've got to have third party counsel because it requires resources that would like drown our stuff. A lot of the documentation, a lot of settlement agreements, mediations, negotiations, things like that. We'll handle that stuff in house.
Hmm.
Preliminary legal reviews, like when we'll run into a new problem. In the early days, I'd stay up till midnight researching the laws. And today, we just get them to do the review and produce a memorandum that says problem, research, solution, forecast kind of thing. And they produce a memorandum. We read it, move on.
Yeah. Yeah. Gotcha. Well, cool, man. We're kind of getting to the end of the show here, and there's always two questions I like to ask at the end. I think you'll have an interesting answer for the first one, which is what is the craziest or most uncomfortable situation that you have ever experienced in a real estate deal?
One of the craziest deals I've done had about 65 owners, and I bought a property that was worth $1.25 million for about $250,000. That includes seller proceeds, taxes, legal, everything. And the weirdest situation, I mean, this was wild, dude. I had one guy at our conference table and a couple guys in the field. Guy at the conference table was researching and calling. Another guy was mapping up on the board all these people. And then we withdrew a bunch of money out of the bank account and gave it to two separate guys. They were driving around town, meeting people and mobile closing agents and all this stuff, buying property, buying shares for 500, 5,000, 200, 6,000, just whatever we negotiated relative to the share. And we're literally developing this family tree as we're buying interest along the way. We were building a bridge as we were walking across it. It was, man, it was one of the wildest deals I've ever done. And shockingly enough, of the 65 ish owners, we bought all but two of them, like rapid succession, great negotiations, smooth, fast. It was, God was on our side. That was a lot of luck, man.
That's wild. 63 people to to buy shares off of. Jeez.
To be fair, there were three properties side by side. It was about three generations of deceased people, lots of ownership. They've been trying to sell this thing for years. Everybody knew they were done with it. There was a pending tax foreclosure. They were going to
Mhm.
lose it if they didn't sell it. All of them had written the thing off except for a couple of them. I mean, it was just the funny thing is, as we were building that family tree out while we were buying, several people were presented to us as children of some people. So we paid them $300, $500 for their deed. And once we completed the research, we learned that they were cousins of somebody else, not actually children. So we bought deeds from people that didn't own anything,
Sure.
but it was okay.
Yeah. 300, $500, right? That's all right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Gotcha. Well, the last question I always like to ask is if you could go back in time, give yourself one piece of advice when you were looking for that first real estate deal, knowing what you know now, what would you tell yourself?
Keep going. It's going to be okay. When you're early on, you have a lot of uncertainty. You don't know where you're headed. You don't know if this new thing you're trying is going to work. You already tried four different things and none of them have been the thing. Is this going to be the thing? You don't know where it's going to land. You don't know if you're just going to do a deal or two and try something else. You don't know if you're going to have a stabilized business 10 years later with an operation and going concern and a life built on it. You have no idea where it's going. But, I look back over all those times and I just remember thinking, I hope it's going to be okay. And I'm going to keep working. And it is going to be okay. Just keep going.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing piece of advice. Logan, if people want to reach out to you after the show, if they have questions, maybe they're interested in your coaching program, or if they have a really messy title deal that they want to
Yeah.
send over to you guys, how can they go about doing that?
Go to loganfullmer.com. There are two L's in Fullmer. Loganfullmer.com. I've got a lot of ways to reach out to us. You'll find the social media channels and all that, and YouTube there. So loganfullmer.com. You'll find us.
Cool. Awesome, man. Well, thanks for being on the show.
Absolutely. No problem, Mike.